Good morning. It is Wednesday, the 12th of January, almost halfway through the first month of the year. Trust it's been a good time for you. I was struck in the reading, Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 to 16. It's the story of Cain and Abel. It's from the Old Testament reading for morning prayer today. And there's much that we can glean from that reading, many questions to ponder. But I want to focus specifically on the actions of Cain and Abel. Remember that Cain is the firstborn and Abel the secondborn. And Cain is the one who is self-absorbed. He's full of his own self-interest. He's an incredibly arrogant person. He has sin crouching at his door, says God, when he confronts him after his evil deed. And it is Abel who has a name which really means someone who's only temporary, who's not here for long, almost a prophetic sense in which that name speaks about the future that Abel would find himself not enjoying, as it were. But what happens is that Cain is a man of the soil. He plants crops. He's a farmer in that respect. Abel is a farmer too, but he is focused on animal husbandry. Now, the important point to take from this is that God is not making any distinction between which form of farming is better than the other. The focus is actually on the mindset and the focus that each of these two boys have in their relationship with the Lord. And it becomes quite obvious as they bring their offerings to God that Cain does so in a manner which is a little bit flippant and offhand. He brings just what he can lay his hands on. There's no real sense of thought or worship of God. Abel, on the other hand, is described as bringing the fattest, the choice portions, the firstborn. All of this, of course, is in its own way significant because it speaks about the curse on Egypt of the death of the firstborn. It talks about Jesus, the firstborn, the only born of God. And that is how we understand Jesus coming to us as a human. But we must understand that on another sense, Jesus is fully God. He's just God in human form. He is born, though, to be fully identified with us as human beings. Look at the Hebrews. That is the New Testament lesson for today. Jesus comes as one of us, to be one of us, to identify with one another, so that when he dies as one of us, and yet he's perfect, because he is God in human form. He had no special powers or favors that made him a superman and able to cope. He, just like you and me, had to suffer all that we suffered. Anyway, back to Cain and Abel. What's interesting is that obviously in these early days, there is a sense of worship of God, whether that is the later writers who must have written about this centuries later, whether they imbue their own thoughts into that writing, or whether it is simply indicative and we read it as we find it, which I tend to think is right in this circumstance. There is a worship of God, and that worship of God, by bringing back to God a portion of what we have, is incredibly important. But it throws up that there's, in a sense, these two ways of approaching God. And this is my point for us today. How do we approach God with what we have? Do we do it in the Abel sense, where we bring the choicest portions, the fat portions, the firstborn? Do we say that our salary or our income from our business or our farm or whatever, that the first call on that is to give back to God a portion as worship of God? Now, do we do so by scratching in our wallets and bringing out all the copper coins, because we know that they're pretty useless and they take up so much space and are heavy in our pockets, and we give that to God thinking, well, I've given him the money, surely God will be impressed with that? That's a Cain way of giving, flippant, offhand, caring more about yourself. So how do you give to God? Is it the Abel fashion, the best of your giving in a way which is sacrificial, shows that you are totally reliant on God? Giving the firstborn is always been seen as indicative of knowing and acknowledging that you are reliant on God. Or do you do it the Cain way and you give the very least that you can, and then you get all grumpy when people point out to you that maybe, I would say definitely, what you're doing is not right? How do you give to God? The Cain way or the Abel way? Folks, have a good day. God bless.